Welcome to episode 62 of the Headspace and Timing podcast, a show brought to you by the Change Your POV podcast network. This is a special Father's Day episode as it's being released on Father's Day 2018 rather than the typical Tuesday release for the show. Today, I'm talking to Pam Saulsby, a military family member and author of a children's book, Ashley's High Five for Daddy. Pam's book, although short, gives a great look at how Ashley's father returns from Afghanistan and how she and her family adjust to the obvious changes in him and the changes to the family.
And I don't believe that silence is an answer to what's going on in a family as it relates to the rhythm of the household being disturbed in a big way or in a small way due to something that's different with the parent. I don't believe that silence is an answer, that there's a way to open communication. And then you can say, well, and we can talk some more about this later, but let's enjoy and love each other through what's going on. I think that's very possible and very necessary.
Welcome to the Change Your POV podcast network. You're listening to Headspace and Timing, a show dedicated to breaking down the stereotypes about veteran mental health. My name's Dwayne France, and I'm a combat veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. After I retired from the Army, I took on a new mission as a clinical mental health counselor for my fellow service members. If you served in any branch of the military, you're familiar with the M2 machine gun, the 50 cal. It's one of the most effective weapons in the military's arsenal. If the weapon's headspace and timing wasn't set right, however, it was just a huge useless chunk of metal. Veterans can be rendered inoperable if their headspace and timing isn't set correctly either. That's my goal with this show, to change the way that we think and talk about veteran mental health and reduce the stigma against seeking support. Each week, we'll talk with mental health professionals, veterans, and those who support veterans, service members, and their families. We're going to have real and honest conversations about a topic that most just don't like to talk about, veteran mental health. Let's jump into this week's conversation. Hey everybody, welcome back to Headspace and Timing, a podcast dedicated to changing the way that we think and talk about veteran mental health. I like to thank you, as always, for taking the time to listen to the show and kind of hear what we're talking about. Today's guest is something pretty interesting. As you well know, we try to highlight those individuals who may have maybe veterans who have some experience, some mental health providers who work with veterans in mental health. But today's guest is a little bit unique in that she has taken her time to not only support veterans with mental health, but also try to access veteran and military family mental health in a unique way. So I'd like to introduce my guest today, Pam Saulsby. Pam, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dwayne. It's great to be with you. And to all of your listeners who may be veterans, I just want to first off say thank you for your service to our country and for protecting our freedoms.
That's really great. And obviously, you and I had talked before, and veterans hear that a lot, and sometimes they question its sincerity. And I definitely would like to tell the listeners that Pam is very sincere about this, of course. You have a background of serving veterans in a couple different ways, right, Pam?
On a couple of different fronts, yes, I do. I can first of all say that I am an Army brat. I was born at Fort Benning, Georgia, so my dad is a veteran. And I've always had veterans issues close to my heart and my head since a little girl coming of age. Growing up and doing what I do now is just trying to be of service in any way that I can to veterans. In addition to the book, I've done a music project. I'm also a vocal artist, saluting and highlighting the achievements of our courageous men and women who serve. As a journalist and a news reporter, I had the pleasure, the distinction, the honor of having a beat, if you will, a special assignment, a regular assignment of covering issues related to veterans, their military life and their families, kind of like just shedding a light or shining a light on the good, the bad, yes, and the ugly. And I've worked with different nonprofits who support veterans. And I had my own production unit. I called it Pam Cam because I had my own video camera and software. And I just went in my community right at the time. I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I would just talk to veterans, talk to their families, and have them express whatever was on their minds on any given day based on issues in the news that were front and center and hot topics. So I just enjoy being of service, and I don't want veterans to ever forget or ever have a feeling that they are forgotten. And so if it means there is war fatigue or battle fatigue among the American public who sometimes wonder, are we still at war? And it's like, yes, we are. Men and women are still bleeding and dying for our country. I just want to keep veterans and their issues at the forefront and make sure that we as a country, as a society, do right by them.
Yeah, and that's really great in that even those who haven't served can continue to serve in different ways. But you also have a unique connection directly to veteran mental health. And as you and I had talked before, you had an experience, an opportunity to work with veterans specifically around mental health.
Yes, I'm a volunteer at the Washington, D.C. VA, and I worked in patient advocacy and experience. And right now I'm participating in questioning veterans around the quality of care. I'm getting an earful of the quality of care at VA medical centers. And for a time, I volunteered in the mental health clinic at the Washington, D.C. VA. And I saw men and women who were there, some of them because they were involuntarily, if you will, committed, and some who checked themselves in, Dwayne, because they knew something wasn't quite right with them and it was impacting their lives and their livelihoods and their families. And so they wanted to get better and they wanted to take whatever steps were necessary offered by the VA to get on the other side of PTSD. And so there was just so many stories of bravery and courage that I saw as a volunteer. And what I admired was the fact that even though it's not as severe as it was, there's still a bit of a stigma attached to a veteran admitting, I have a mental health issue. It should not be, but it still is a reality. So to step up and say, I need help in that vein, I think is very courageous. So it's not a sign of weakness to say, I need help in the area of mental health. It is a sign of strength.
Yes, and that's exactly why I was so encouraged to have you on the show, because even with your journalistic background and of course being able to highlight certain stories, you're not blind to the fact of the impact both on the military, on the service member, but also on the family, and that the mental health and wellness of the service member is as important a story for you as just sort of those feel-good coming home kind of things.
Oh, absolutely. And I can also tell you, Dwayne, that this interest of mine in covering news and information related to veterans really was born out of my experiences as a young child, experiencing the Vietnam War through the eyes of my family. First of all, my dad did not serve in Vietnam, but when he would come home from work, it was always front and center because they called the Vietnam War the living room war, because it was played out in homes night after night after night, and it was unfiltered. You could actually see, combat footage and the bravery of the men and women who served, but you also saw the fear that lived in them as well. And so I was really, really shy as a child. It's interesting. They say, okay, so now you're in journalism and you're in front of the camera and you sing, but it happened over time. But when I was young, I was very timid and shy. And so I didn't know. I was too shy to ask about what I was seeing even though I was having a heck of a time processing what I was seeing. So no one explained it to me, and I was too shy to ask, is this really happening? Or, are these men actually getting hit? And, is this, it looks like some kind of a jungle. Where is this? What's going on? So I had that playing in my childhood, as well as seeing young men from my neighborhood return from their tour of duty in Vietnam, and they were so different from the way I remembered them when they left. And so my sister, who's older than I am, they would come and visit her, and I would just overhear and notice that they seemed so different, the things they talked about, and they were so agitated, and they kept talking about the enemy, and they seemed mature so far beyond their years. And in addition to that, just talking about the layers of my early childhood experience in mental health and military and veterans, I had an uncle who was a captain in the Vietnam War, and he was deeply impacted by what he saw and what he did. And so he came back to the States with severe mental instability, to the point where he had to be admitted into a hospital, and he spent just years and years of his life, trying to get help, but unable to rejoin, if you will, society. So all of that was going on, and I was trying to process it, but was having a very difficult time. And as I grew older, I became just transfixed with the Vietnam War. I read a lot of books. I saw a lot of films and documentaries, because I wanted to understand what that conflict was all about. And I felt I had such empathy for the men and women who served. And the question became, well, how is that going to come out in your life? Because surely it left a mark, and surely you care and care deeply. And so that's where the book came from. I was at a space and time in my life professionally where I had a bit of downtime, where I could devote to putting together some thoughts and talking with professionals in the field. In fact, the Army, I contacted the Army and asked if they could find a child psychiatrist who could work with me as a consultant to the book, to make sure what I was communicating was factual, and that it would be appropriate for a certain age group. So Ashley's High Five for Daddy, Dwayne, is the name of the book, and it's a children's picture book for children ages 4 to 6. And so the Army put me in touch with a child psychiatrist at Womack Army Medical Center. That's at Fort Bragg, which is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Dr. John Lessica is its name, and he worked so closely with me and helping me put this book together. But what it allowed me to do was to take all of those feelings and emotions that were deep-seated but unexpressed, deep-seated yet unexpressed, and bring those to life, to bring it all to life. And so that was the motivation behind the book, knowing combat veterans who were having some trouble adjusting, and really needed time and space after you have that beautiful, homecoming, which we all, of course, love to see play out on television and in videos. But, that's kind of like a honeymoon period for military families. And it's like, well, what happens after that? And what if there is a veteran who loves his or her family, yet it's kind of, it's like an activity overload, and it's too much going on, too much to process at one time. And so the book was born out of, how do you have a conversation with the young child around that in a way that makes sense to him or her?
And I think that's some really great background for the book specifically, in seeing you experienced Ashley as yourself, and knowing that, I can see where Ashley in the book, and we'll explain a little bit more about the book in a minute. But you as a young lady, you as a child, really seeing that with your the men in your community and your uncle, and having the same questions, but then also as an adult recognizing that history is essentially repeating itself, and knowing that there are other young men and women, children out there who had the same questions that you did. And this is a way for you to answer those questions for yourself and for them.
Yes, there are modern day military families and combat veterans who are similarly situated. And so I saw so many parallels, but rather than have a child be kind of stuck in a situation that doesn't make sense to them, I wanted to make it so that the parents could explain to her in a way that she would understand, and with great love and caring, why her dad was just a little bit different and why he needed space, and how this, and then to make the high five just a symbol of, let it be symbolic of unbroken, everlasting love between a parent and child, so that when words can't be expressed for whatever reason, they have a symbol that solidifies and their love. And it shows it's an understanding between them that everything really is okay.
Right, in that the story is impactful. I think I told you, obviously, when I first read it, and it is a children's book, but it's impactful for a father who had experienced this homecoming on his own. So maybe if you could talk us through the book a little bit. Ashley is the main character, and her father is returning from Afghanistan, and that's really where the book starts.
That's right. So there's all of this happiness and joy and anticipation as her dad is coming home from the war, and there's a homecoming coming up. They're going to the military base to see him, to embrace him, to take him home. There's a party that's planned and executed. It's carried out, and family and friends are there to share in the moment. So it is and lots of pictures are being taken, and there's a lot of noise, and it's a loving scene, but it's also, there's a lot of chaos, just because there's so much happiness and celebrating going on. And so Ashley's dad is taking all of this in and has a moment where it gets to be just a little bit too much. There's too much talking, there's too much music, there's too much, taking pictures. It's just
it's chaos,
scene.
Right? Yeah.
I didn't want to call it chaos, but for him processing
sure.
it truly is. We watch soldiers come and go from deployments, and they come home, and there's a joy in homecoming, but there's also some difficulty that shows up as well, as a military member is being integrated into family life and back into society. So I wanted the book to be to demonstrate that there is a need for the grown-ups in the family to prepare themselves and their children for the possibility that their loved one returning from service may need some extra time and space as they are being reintroduced into the family. And so there's a signal, a high five, that reminds Ashley and her dad of their love for each other when words and other actions just for whatever reason cannot be helpful. So that happens. And if you don't mind, there's a part in the book I'd love to share with your listeners. It's a part of the book that I don't know. I love the illustrations that my illustrator did, and it's just, they're beautiful. But there's an image of Ashley face to face with her mom, a really, really close shot. And she's beautiful. Her mom is beautiful. And Ashley is just trying to understand. And Dwayne, if it's okay, I'll read. It's just a page or two.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay. Because Ashley sees her dad leave with all of, it's like they were just beginning to have cake, and she can't understand, this is like the best party ever. And I saw Dad go back into the house. So it reads as follows. Ashley's mom pulls her close to her side. Ashley, your dad was in a place where there were big noises around him and lots of people. It was loud almost all the time, Mom said. You mean like music on the radio or fireworks on the 4th of July, Mom? Ashley asks. Yeah, but it was 10 times louder than that, her mom explains. Ashley's mom told her that there would be times that her dad would need to take a break from big noises and crowds of people. Okay, Ashley says. So just leaving that there, she begins to understand in a way that makes sense to her why her dad may want to get away from the balloons and the music and all of the loud talking that's going on. And so I believe that there is a way to explain anything to a child. I mean, you don't have to go, way out there in terms of explaining why a mom or dad may be different than the child remembered. But, a simple statement of facts like that with love and caring is enough. And you and I were talking, Dwayne, about how as a child, for a military child who's 13, 14, 15, the conversation would go down
Very
a lot,
differently.
very, very differently. Yes. So that was my point. I believe that, children just want to be safe, and their world is so small, obviously, compared to ours, that when something comes along and shakes it up a little bit, I mean, it's huge. Something that seems small to us is huge to them. I mean, and they're sponges and they absorb so much. And when that is disrupted in just the slightest way, it has a big, big impact. And so Ashley's mom helps her understand why her dad may need space from time to time, as he's getting used to being back home with the family, and she gets it. And then, the book, in a few pages further, I should say, Dwayne, she and her dad comes out, he's cool, he's fine, and then when they do the high five, it's like, you know, she knows, like, we're so good, like, we're fine. And because it's a children's book, Dwayne, I didn't get deep into post-traumatic stress. It becomes a tool, a way for families who are maybe searching and challenged to find ways to talk about it. It becomes a way for them to open and engage their children in conversation with what's going on. And I don't believe that silence is an answer to what's going on in a family as it relates to um, the rhythm of the household being disturbed in a big way or in a small way due to something that's different with the parent. I don't believe that silence is an answer. That there's a way to open communication, and then you can say, well, and we can talk some more about this later. But let's enjoy and love each other through what's going on. I think that's very possible and very necessary.
No, and that you're absolutely correct. And silence is not the answer, and not just intergenerationally between children, but also between parents, and between spouses and things like that. And so. Of course, I had a mentor of mine say it's always good to have somebody that you can say anything to, but you don't have to tell them everything.
Ah,
Right?
that's a gem right there.
And it is, and
Yes.
that's so when I came back from my deployments, I knew that I would be able to tell my wife anything, and she wouldn't judge me or condemn me or anything like that. But I also didn't have to tell her everything. There was that sort of that safety net. And you mentioned how you didn't get that deep into things or PTSD in the book. But yet it is a pretty accurate representation, and it is pretty deep. And as if you'll indulge me in a passage in the book that it was impactful for me as a parent because it shows the impact of this. And in the beginning of the book, this is earlier than the party. And Ashley and I think her grandparents are in the back seat. She's in the back seat with their grandparents, and her father is driving, which is a fun. He hasn't driven in America in how long. But there's some noise there too, right? Ashley, it's getting a little overwhelming for Ashley. And so it says, it's all too much for 8-year-old Ashley to take. The car is noisy. Everybody's talking at the same time. Mom, can you please turn the radio up, she says. She dances in her seat. It's my favorite band, Forever Young, Ashley says. She leans closer to her dad's seat. Daddy, did you get to listen to all the music you like while you were gone, she asked. "I sure did," her father answers. "I would sing along with the music in the way we always used to. It made me think of you and your mom," he says softly. And you could see that his mind is still where he came from. That is a very accurate reflection of even this small reminder. I'm still there, and yet I'm here, and it reminds me of how much I missed your mother and you, right? I miss my family. And yet, this isn't, and of course, this goes over Ashley's head, but it still shows the impact of what this reunion is on the family. And so I think it's a really great, accurate representation of how the adults see the reunion, even if Ashley doesn't pick up on how deep that gets.
That's right, because at a time where there is obvious joy around the occasion, there's some apprehension and there's concern, because the dad has gone from war zone, and of course there's a period of readjustment, and you're there and you're getting yourself grounded and situated to what's going to come next, but there's a lot of concern and apprehension. So, and I know that that's natural and normal, but then when you bring in young kids and children into that equation, it becomes necessary to plan ahead of time how you might deal with adjustment issues, because that's natural and normal in the process of readjusting. There are going to be issues that come up. They were in a very dangerous place, and now they're back home, and balancing that and having that make sense is a challenge for any family. Just my heart and my hat goes off to the families who reunite and then have to deal with the issues of war. I mean, when they leave the war, it comes home with them.
The war does not, that's exactly it. The war does not stay where it is. And this is a phenomenon that I regularly see with veterans, and of course even experienced myself. I wrote a blog post, and as well as linking to where the listeners can find Ashley's High Five for Daddy, I'm also going to link to this post, but it's what happens when Johnny comes marching home, but Johnny's not Johnny anymore, right? Whoa. When I came back in the front door, I was only gone for a year, and I still looked like me, but yet I wasn't necessarily the same me on the inside. And this is what's happening to Ashley's daddy. Is to Ashley's eyes, maybe he lost a little more weight or gained a little weight or whatever it was, but he's still the same person. But veterans are not necessarily the same person on the inside when they come home. And the book does a very good, very respectful job of handling that, and not saying, maybe where there's where daddy's trying to get away from the party and mom's saying, no, you have to stay, that there's some grace there, that he's allowed to be taking some time to fully come back. And
have that when it occurs, and have that make sense and be all right is just huge. In getting the book published, I began, and once it was published, I began to hear from people that I know who are veterans who purchased the book, and they had conversations with me about how it landed on them and how it landed on their families. And one veteran, a woman, female veteran, wrote me that she had post-traumatic stress, and she had 2 young sons. And when she came home, she was showing the signs of that, the distress of having post-traumatic stress, and the symptoms were coming out. And her husband at the time told her that he was going to give her 6 months to get her act together, or they were going to separate and divorce, and he was going to leave. And so 6 months went by, and she was still in the throes of her condition, and he left her. And so he left her with 2 young boys, and she said, she wished that there had been a book like Ashley's High Five for Daddy when she was caught up in that situation, trying to make sense of a world that her world that had shattered, and truly it had just gone crazy, with him leaving her in distress and two young boys. She said that it would have helped her greatly to explain to them what was going on with her situation, not like Ashley's in the specifics, but it would have been a tool for her to at least begin to open conversations around what was happening to her.
And I think that's really where the book is very beneficial. Again, in my experience as a clinical mental health provider, I know veterans desperately want to tell their story, while at the same time, and in an equal measure, nobody can drag it out of them. Or they don't know how to talk about it. And I can see Ashley's High Five for Daddy being a medium through which the story is communicated without it being so personal. It's very much a tool or a measure to be able to say, maybe I'm not even aware of what I personally feel, but this book seems to make me feel the way I feel, and it can give you an idea of what I'm feeling. And that's definitely how I read it, and it sounds like that's some of the impact that it's had on some of the feedback you've gotten.
Yes, it's a very healthy reaction to what happens to veterans, and then how it spills over and impacts their little ones as well. I had one military mom take the book to her children's school. She had two young children, and she wanted to have it in the media center and have the classes of her children read it, like the children, her children's schoolmates, classmates actually experienced the book, because they knew that their classmate's dad was in Afghanistan and he was back, and the family was having issues, but it just wanted the classmates to have a glimpse of the life of a military child. They were not on a base, and all the kids were from the experiencing some of the same experiences on a base in a military community. They were just in regular society in a regular public school, and so I had that kind of reaction. I also talked to a veteran whose son had a better understanding of why his dad, who loved to go to the beach, all of a sudden he returned home from combat and he didn't want to go to the beach anymore. And he was like, Dad, like Dad doesn't want to go near the sand, and Mom, this is where we always have so much fun. And, why are we not going to the beach? Or why is Dad reacting this way to going to the beach, or to talk about the beach? And so the book became a tool for them to explain, why the dad was having just an adverse reaction to an activity that the family used to love together. So again, it's just opening up communications, and sometimes it's too close and it's too deep for a family member to reveal, and then this keeps it on the surface, but at least it addresses what is clearly going on in a family when something's different. Something's not quite the same. And when something is different, and I don't mean to say something's wrong with the mother or father, but I would just say when something is different, children know and they pick up on it. And then I just go back, Dwayne, to the reality and the fact that, silence is not the way. It's not an answer, because whatever is happening, it stays there. And I can certainly attest to that. It stays there, and if it's not addressed, it just kind of grows and festers and comes out in different ways. And so the best thing, is to have a short conversation about it. And I guess, children just want to know that it's not their fault. They want to know that they're going to be safe, and everything's all right, and that the love. I mean, they want to know that the love is still there, and those things are so basic.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the book is a good model for parents to address their own homecoming, in which you see the dad, and the illustrations are very good, and you can see him being stressed at the party, but then when he comes back out, he's in his civilian clothes, he has He's obviously maybe changed, maybe had a beer or whatever. But then he comes out and gives that same signal. And for Ashley and her daddy, it's a high five. It could be a fist bump. It could be anything. But having that thing that tells the child, you're safe, I still love you, that's the important thing that sort of gives the child the comfort.
Yes, that's what it's all about. Any kind of a signal, like you said, a high five or a fist bump, it solidifies the relationship and the normalcy of the relationship, reminding the child, the young one, of the service member's love when words and other actions just are not helpful, or for some reason, the right words don't come up. We all love to experience the joy through the eyes of a military family when they come back together. These reunifications are extraordinary, but military families also have to deal with regaining and re-entering society and a new normal. And so this book is a tool to do that. I think our families, military families, persevere and demonstrate the grace and strength that they have through the eyes and the experiences of Ashley's family.
No, I entirely agree, and it is a very well done book. I think it's worth looking at both from a parent standpoint and a child standpoint. So if listeners were interested in getting the book or for themselves or maybe for a family member, where can they find it, and where can they find more about you if they'd like to connect?
Well, they can go to Amazon, and just put Ashley's High Five for Daddy in the search box. And I'm working with a great publishing company of military veterans. It's called Tactical 16. They can find out more about me on that website, tactical16.com, and read some of the book and order the book through Tactical 16 as well.
And I'm definitely going to make sure that there are links to that in the show notes as it is, and also much appreciation to Tactical 16 and a friend of the show, Chris Schaefer, who connected the two of us that's working with Tactical 16. And even Chris, as he and I were talking about this book, how important it was for him and for military service members to be able to use this to be able to communicate to their kids. So I think that it's a great book and definitely is worth getting the information out there.
Thank you. It was just an honor meeting you, and I wanted to personally thank you for your service. But I always feel that after you thank a veteran for his or her service, you should next think, what action can I take to back that up, whether it's helping them with a job, pointing them in the right direction to a job, if it's offering to be of any kind of assistance or service, if you've got some knowledge that you can pass on. It's just, with the thanks, I think the next step should be action. And my writing this book was a way to demonstrate beyond thanking veterans, showing them my compassion and wanting to be of service to them for the service they provided to us.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, is the action that you've taken with this book and even sharing the book with us. It goes to show exactly what I said at the beginning, that when you personally say thank you for your service, it's not just an empty platitude. It is truly something that you really believe. And this action that you took with the book is a great way to show that. So thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, Dwayne, thank you so much. My pleasure.
You're listening to Headspace and Timing on the Change Your POV Podcast Network. When Pam and I recorded the episode, I didn't necessarily intend for it to be released around Father's Day, but as it was scheduled, we thought that it would be appropriate for the show to be released today. As a father myself, having gone through 4 deployments and countless other separations, reintegration is a very real and possibly challenging event. There wasn't a year between 2006 and 2013 that I wasn't gone for part of or even the entire year. My children were in kindergarten when I started to deploy and approaching high school when I stopped. That's a large amount of time in any life, but especially a child's life. Another thing that this book illustrates is that veteran mental health does not happen in a vacuum. Ashley's daddy isn't broken, he isn't damaged, but he's certainly changed after returning from combat. After all, who wouldn't be? The things that service members saw and did changed them in big ways and small ways, and that's a reality that we have to address. If you have a child or know other veterans who have children, take the time to get the book. As Pam mentioned, it can be used to help children understand transition, and it can be used to help non-military children understand what their fellow classmates are experiencing. Getting the word out is critical, and Pam's book is an easy way to do that. A couple reminders. We're giving away free books to organizational partners. June's partner is Inner Resource Psychotherapy, and the owner of the practice, Amy Otzel, is an Army veteran. Amy and I have had some great conversations, and I hope to have her on the show in July. If you want to support Amy's work regarding veteran mental health, head on over to veteranmentalhealth.com/combatvetbook and pick up a copy. And I'd like to remind everybody that we have a daily update on Amazon Alexa. Just go to veteranmentalhealth.com/Alexa and add the update to your flash briefing, and you'll get daily updates about veteran mental health and wellness. And every once in a while, you might get a chance to get a free copy of the Combat Vet book as well. Just listen daily to check it out. Next week, we're talking to another mental health professional who's not a veteran but has taken time to understand veterans. Tom Ayala is a licensed professional counselor serving rural veterans in Oregon, and we have a great conversation about the uniqueness of meeting the needs of these veterans. So tune in next week, and until then, stay focused and be well. I'd like to thank the Change Your POV Podcast Network for hosting this show and highlighting the critical importance of veteran mental health. We want to hear from you. You can reach out to me via email at dwayne@veteranmentalhealth.com. You can find me at Twitter @TheCounselingVet, or head on over to Facebook and look for the Change Your POV Squad. You can find the show notes for this episode and all the episodes by going to veteranmentalhealth.com or changeyourpov.com. Sign up for updates on either or both so you don't miss another episode. While you're at it, check out the other great shows in the Change Your POV Podcast Network. The show about remembering our military history and reviving our warrior spirit, changing hearts and minds. The show about outdoor activities that us veterans love so much, Neophyte in the Woods. The show that helps us get going at the beginning of the week, Motivation Monday. And Attack Fridays, the show that brings you actionable tips, tricks, and coachable knowledge to help you make the best of your transition. While you're checking out the other shows, drop us a review in iTunes or whatever podcast platform you're listening to. The reviews really help spread the word about what we're doing. If you're looking for the total package for all the information you need to live the life you want after leaving the military, you found it. If you know of a buddy who's looking for the same info, share it with them so they can find it too. I want to thank Doc Todd for his permission to use his track, Not Alone, from his amazing album, Combat Medicine. Doc Todd is somebody who's trying to bring veteran mental health out of the darkness and into the light, and you can get the album by going to therealdoctodd.com. Check it out, because remember, veterans, you're not alone. Ever.
The struggle is real, found a feast and lost a soul. Eventually my drinking, it got out of control. There in darkness I roam, struggling to find home. See, suddenly death didn't feel so alone. 22 a day, destination unknown. It could have been avoided if you picked up the phone, but now you're gone, so I guess all we get is the tone. Nothing but bone weeds, overgrown, pushing up stones. I've triumphed over enemies, co-created mini-me's. Broke out facilities that tried to put an end to me. R.I.P. I'd rather grind in tranquility. Authentic tendency, embrace my ability.
I try so hard to have faith. I bow my head and I pray. Lord, please lend me the strength to carry on and keep standing. How this life so demanding, so much pain, all this plenty. I hurt each time my way, but with you I'm not alone.
You're not alone.
Yeah. That every time that I fall, I'ma call on you, get myself back up again.
Without my Georgia guys. Take those bottles out, dog, and pour them in the sink. Take the needles out your arm and the gun away from your forehead. It's time, man, you've been through enough pain, stand up. It's time to stand back up. All my veterans, man, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Get up, you know.
Oh, I try so